What about sleep? I would recommend all of you order this book on Amazon. This is from Dr. Matthew Walker, a PhD from Harvard, who for his master's thesis, he writes in the introduction, he thought, you know, I thought if I pick this topic of sleep, I can get it done in a few months and I can breeze through in an interesting topic for my master's. And in the next sentence, he says, 30 years later, I'm still learning of all the value of sleep, that you will learn so much about what happens. For example, parasympathetic nervous system must be enacted in order for regeneration to occur. You do not regenerate in a sympathetic dominant state. When you're in a stress situation, fight, flight, or fright, you do not stimulate regeneration of your tissue. It's in a parasympathetic dominant state. And when are we in a parasympathetic dominant state? Perhaps when we meditate, perhaps when we pray, and perhaps when we sleep. That's it. You want a healthier, younger you? You will find out why as you read this book. Sleep is a basic 101 component to being younger and more vital, more energy and less disease. But here, one study found that less than 5 hours of sleep over 7 consecutive days increased the risk of developing rhinoviruses from colds by 350% when compared to individuals who slept at 7 hours per night. There are many, many studies on the benefit of sleep. I would recommend get the book when you can to learn more over time, but just understand you need to be in a parasympathetic dominant state for your immune system to be functioning in a protective way and stimulating regeneration of tissue, meaning getting rid of old and dying cells, and which stimulates the regeneration and production of new cells. It's only done in a parasympathetic dominant state. And of course, when you sleep, you're producing more melatonin. Melatonin has been shown to inhibit NF-kappa B activation and inflammasome activation. The age-related decline in melatonin production is one of the proposed mechanisms to explain why children do not appear to have severe flu symptoms and older adults do. When you read these studies, you say, well, that just makes sense. I want more melatonin levels. It reduces oxidative lung injury and inflammatory cell recruitment during viral infections. When you have low melatonin levels, that sets up the stage to have a more acute respiratory distress response to the exposure of a virus. Another reason why sleep's so good is because you increase melatonin levels when you're sleeping. But we want to educate our patients to get off their computers at night. Turn off the television an hour before you go to sleep. I educate my patients to take baths. Take a hot bath with some Epsom salts, magnesium, before you go to sleep. And notice how you sleep. Do that for 3 days in a row and notice how you feel. And when patients do, they come back, yeah, doc, I just feel better. This is a really important time to consider making that recommendation to your patients. And here are just some of the mechanisms by which melatonin will protect the lungs and enhance immune system function, protecting our patients from these viral infections. What about zinc? I don't know why the study doesn't show, sorry for that. Intracellular target for zinc-mediated inhibition is the viral RNA polymerase, which is inhibited by increasing intracellular zinc. You increase zinc levels, you inhibit the coronavirus and other viruses from getting inside the cell. The relative amount of viral S protein RNA detectable in infected cells was significantly reduced by zinc treatments. You must give your patients zinc. It's such a helpful tool. In case of zinc chloride treatment, the reduction was more than 40-fold. And in case of zinc sulfide treatments, it was 16-fold compared to the viral RNA levels in the untreated wells. Zinc reduces viral reproduction. Look at the title of the article, Antiviral Activity of Zinc Salts Against Transmissible Gastroenteritis Virus. The results of the study suggest that zinc salts mediate antiviral effects through inhibition of viral penetration. It can't get into your cell, or egress of the intracellular phase of the viral life cycle. Taken together, the data reported in this report show that zinc salts specifically inhibit the replication of the coronavirus in a concentration-dependent manner. Could they say it any clearer? The coronavirus cannot penetrate the cells as easily if there's enough zinc. And in this study, look at the title of this study. Zinc blocks the replication of these viruses. Now, the mechanism by which zinc works is the mechanism by which hydroxychloroquine works. You may have heard of hydroxychloroquine. In the US, a couple of weeks ago, the government fast-tracked approval for this malarial drug for coronavirus. I'm going to show you why. Chloroquine is an anti-malarial medication in viruses. Chloroquine inhibits pH-dependent stages of replication. It inhibits the replication. The virus can't replicate. Pharmacological modeling utilizing dosing from another in vitro study show that hydroxychloroquine has a higher potency than chloroquine at inhibiting the SARS-CoV-2 virus infection. The suggested dosing from this study was 400 milligrams BID for the first day and then 200 milligrams BID for the following 4 days. You can read more about the dosing in this study that I am giving you. Look at this title. Chloroquine is a zinc ionophore. Chloroquine enhanced zinc uptake into the cell in a concentration-dependent manner. If you added copper, it didn't have an effect. It didn't negate the effect of zinc, but it didn't add to the effect. So the concern about dosing with zinc without copper, it's a valid concern long-term. Short-term for a few weeks, it's not a problem, unless a person already has a copper deficiency. And there may be some that do. Chloroquine has been used for centuries to treat malaria. Derived from the bark of the cinchona or the fever tree, quinine has proved a highly effective treatment against the malaria parasite for over 350 years. It was during the 1800s that the British troops in India were given quinine to take as a daily medicine to stop them contracting malaria. Even though anecdotal evidence is impressive, I have to tell you, there's no conclusive scientific evidence that quinine can protect against or treat COVID-19. For hydroxychloroquine, there is some science because the pharmaceutical companies have spent the money to show it, but not for quinine. But it's been used for over 350 years. Let me show you. Quinine is a bitter substance, and so to help the medicine go down, they mix it with water and sugar and local fruits, and in doing so, they created the first tonic water. That's what tonic water is, quinine, and a little bit of sugar and a little bit of water, sometimes with a little flavoring in there. The British troops also carried a ration of gin with them, and with their officers' permission, they added an expedient of gin to their daily tonic, and thus was born gin and tonic. That's where that cocktail came from. But tonic water, it came from the need to use quinine, and it helped the quinine taste better. With hydroxychloroquine and quinine are both used in anti-malarial drugs, the quinine in tonic water is naturally derived from the bark of the cinchona tree. Caution though, hydroxychloroquine is a synthetically manufactured drug used to treat malaria and developed based on the chemical structure of quinine. A lot of tonic waters available to buy do not use real quinine. They use artificially synthesized substitutes instead. Now this company, Fever Tree, as the name of the cinchona tree is the fever tree, this company not only uses real quinine, but the highest quality medicinal grade quinine. So my wife and I have been drinking tonic water every day since I found these studies. I don't know if it's going to help, but I suspect it is. But the way quinine works, it enhances zinc getting into your cells. That's how quinine worked to prevent malaria, enhancing zinc getting into your cells. That's part of the mechanism by how hydroxychloroquine works, enhancing zinc getting into your cells. So we're taking zinc every day and we're having a little tonic water with it. Just make sure to read the label that it's got quinine in it. Typically, quinine is prescribed in 500 milligram doses. Tonic water contains roughly 83 milligrams of quinine, so it's not a medical dose that you're getting, but it's going to help this much. There's, once again, no conclusive evidence that quinine can protect against or treat COVID-19. Type 2 taste receptors may play an important role in host defense mechanisms. Now, what's interesting for me to find out is that type 2 taste receptors prevent a cytokine storm. How? By regulating natural killer cell mediated cytotoxicity, chemokine signaling pathways, T cell receptor signaling pathways, tumor necrosis factor signaling pathways, and others. Why am I telling you about this? Because the taste receptors, type 2 bitter taste receptors, that's how quinine works, are not just on your tongue, they're throughout your body. And in this paper that I'm giving you, they identified quinine, chloroquine, artemisinin, chlorpheniramine, yohimbine, and dextromethorphan, which may target the most common symptoms because they're all bitters. And the bitter taste receptors are on your reproductive cells. They're on your immune cells. They're in your liver. They're in your kidney. They're in your gallbladder. They're not just on the tongue. So when you take tonic water, when you take quinine, when you take hydroxychloroquine, they're binding to these bitter taste receptors that are throughout your body. Now, what about the microbiome? One of my mentors is Alessio Fasano. He's a friend and a mentor. He's the chair of pediatric gastroenterology at Harvard, Mass General. And this is the guy who in 1997 identified zonulin as the protein that causes pathogenic intestinal permeability or the leaky gut. Now, he is highly quoted throughout the world, and he's very careful of everything he says. This paper just came out January 31st of this year, and look at the title of the article. All disease begins in the leaky gut. All disease begins in the leaky gut. What about immune-mediated diseases? All disease begins in the leaky gut. What about cancer? All disease begins in the leaky gut. What about acute respiratory distress syndrome? All disease begins in the leaky gut. Do you get the message? When you look at the mechanisms of all this, if you take the time to study all of this, you will see the gateway in the development of degenerative diseases, inflammatory degenerative diseases, which are all degenerative diseases. The gateway in their development begins with a dysbiotic microbiome and intestinal permeability. During the past decade, a growing number of publications, hundreds of publications, have focused on genetics, the microbiome, proteomics of the microbiome, suggesting that loss of mucosal barrier function, particularly in the GI tract, but also in the lungs, also in the brain, may substantially affect antigen delivery, ultimately influencing the close bidirectional interaction between gut microbiome and our immune system. If you have an immune system in the first 5 days of exposure to this virus, you started getting sore throat, mild fever, a cough, you've got an immune system that's not functioning up to par. And if you're one of the 20% that has to go to the hospital, your immune system is really not functioning up to par. And as part of the protocol for every one of us treating our patients, you have to rebuild the microbiome for the future, not to treat them when they're acute right now. That's not going to fix the acute phase of what they've got, but you must address their microbiome to protect them in the future. That's what Professor Fasano is saying in this article. You'll enjoy this article. This crosstalk is highly influential in shaping the host's gut immune system function. And as you know, 70% of the immune system, 70 to 80%, depending on what study you read, is in your gut. Testing. What about testing? Mrs. Patient, your immune system is the armed forces in your body. It's there to protect you. There's an Army, an Air Force, a Marines, a Coast Guard, a Navy, IgA, IgG, IgM, IgE, IgD. There are many different branches of the immune system. So when an allergist does a skin prick test looking for allergies, and if it comes back negative to wheat and tomatoes, can you tell the parent it's okay for your child to eat wheat? No, you can't, because you've only tested the Air Force. You've only tested IgE. What about the Marines, IgA, which is the diagnostic marker for celiac disease? Well, I don't know, I didn't test it. What about the Army, IgG? Well, I don't know, I didn't test it. Or if you do a 90 food IgG panel for your patients looking for food sensitivities, and it comes back negative to a food, can you say it's okay to eat that food? No, you can't. What about IgA? What about IgM? Well, I didn't test them. Our laboratories, what they're doing today is archaic. Excuse me, but it's archaic. It was cutting edge, state of the art when these tests were designed in the 1980s or the 1990s. ELISA was designed in the mid-1980s. The skin prick test, IgE, designed in the 1950s. They were cutting edge, but we now know not every branch of the armed forces gets activated every time you do a test. So you check somebody for IgG for coronavirus and it's negative. Have they been exposed? You don't know, because you haven't checked IgM. You haven't checked IgA. You don't know. You just don't know. So for some, this may be expanding a concept about testing, but the laboratories you use, if they are only testing one immunoglobulin, it's limited in what they're testing. Point number 2, there are multiple different components of the COVID-19 virus, and many of the laboratories are checking IgG for spike protein 1. And when they look at that, if you do not have antibodies to IgG spike protein 1, they're telling you you haven't been exposed. You can't say that, because what about the nucleocapsid protein and the RNA? What about the envelope protein? Well, I don't know, I didn't test them. My lab doesn't test them. So you want laboratory testing as comprehensive as you can possibly find, depending on where you are in the world. There is a laboratory that looks at 4 different components of the COVID-19 virus. Vibrant Wellness, go to their website, look at what they're talking about in their testing. This is in the US, I know it's in the US, but then talk to your laboratories. Vibrant Wellness is looking at 4 different components of the virus: IgG, IgM, and IgA. You're not going to miss anything. This is the most comprehensive test that's out there, and it has 97 to 99% sensitivity, 98 to 100% specificity. Every time, right on the money. So if you can get that test, get that test. If not, talk to your laboratories and say, I want more components of this COVID-19 tested for. I want IgM and IgG. At least you have to do IgM and IgG, because IgM is the initial immunoglobulin response. It's the initial adaptive immune response. For the first few weeks, you make IgM. The antibodies last a week, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, and then you convert over to IgG, which is a more long-term response. Studies are coming out saying they're noticing the antibodies are there 4 weeks later, 8 weeks later. We don't know how long they're going to last, because no one's ever checked this before. But at this point, we know they're lasting up to 8 weeks. That's what I saw currently a couple days ago as the most current information. Some IgG antibodies, like to measles, they last months and months and months. But you want to see if your patients have developed immunity. But if whatever test you're doing for them, if it comes back and it says they do not have antibodies, then you have to work on enhancing the innate immune system to make sure that they've got as much protection as possible for when they get exposed, because there is likely to be a rebound coming in the fall. Dr. Anthony Fauci from the National Centers of Allergies and Infectious Disease was just talking about that yesterday. Be prepared. So after this current emergency crisis is over, we have a number of months before the expected rebound is going to come. I'm going to check all of my patients to see if they have antibodies to this virus. If they do, great. You've got immunity. You're protected. Now let's just focus on making sure you keep the innate immune system strong so that you don't need to access the adaptive immune system. But I'm going to make sure, I want to check everyone that I can for that. But whatever your laboratory service is, use the best tests that you have available. Once again, I want to remind you that all of the studies and the slides are available to you at thedr.com/clinica. And once again, prevention is the ultimate principle of wisdom. To cure a disease after it's manifested is like digging a well when one is thirsty and forging a weapon after the war has begun. And with that, I will say thank you for your kind attention, and we now will take questions.
Okay, Dr. Tom, thank you. A lot of information. I have a question because I work a lot in my clinic with IV vitamin C infusions. And I believe that it's very, very necessary start with vitamin C infusions in the early stages of COVID-19, because we can prevent like this the cytokines storm. But I want to know your opinion about using these infusions on patients that haven't been diagnosed with COVID-19 just for prevention.
Very good question. My wife and I are currently in Costa Rica. We made it here before the airports closed. We're back at our honeymoon location and rekindling our relation, which is wonderful. But if I were home, I would be getting an IV infusion once or twice a week, every week. I would rather have expensive urine right now and have way too much, safely, but have more than I need rather than not sure if I have enough.
Okay, perfect. Yes. So you recommend maybe twice a week, one infusion, because I put in an infusion 25 grams.
25 grams is an excellent amount, and once a week will just enhance your function so much more. If you're a little bit of a crazy like me, I would do twice. I'd do twice a week, but that's not necessary. Once a week will be plenty for most everyone.
And what about liposomal vitamin C?
Liposomal vitamin C is an excellent way to get vitamin C. For those that don't know, liposomal means the vitamin C has been built into a delivery system that goes right in through the oral cavity into your lymphatics and into your bloodstream. It's an excellent way. I would just recommend before you use any liposomal products, you brush your teeth. You brush your teeth and rinse well, because the oral microbiome has over 800 families of bacteria. And I don't like the idea of using liposomals in the mouth, and you might carry some bacteria in with the liposomal. There's not much evidence for that, but I would err on the side of caution. During this time when we want high levels of vitamin C in our bloodstream and in our lymphatics, I am recommending liposomal for those that have access to liposomal vitamin C, because it will increase your blood levels quickly. So it's a good thing, but just brush your teeth first before you use it.
Okay, perfect. So I also make a lot of vitamin D tests here in Costa Rica, and I found that almost 90% of my patients shows low levels of vitamin C, even children. And as you know, Costa Rica is a very sunny country, even in rainy season. And what do you think is the cause of these low levels of vitamin D?
Many people are not going outside enough, or they protect themselves when they're outside. Many people are like that. There may be a genetic variation here for people whose ancestors for generations and generations have lived in this hot tropical climate. I don't know the answer to your question, but that makes it much more important to do the blood test. So when people come to your office, they're coming because they're sick. And then you're testing them and you're finding, yeah, you've got low vitamin D. We need to fix that. So how many people out there are sick that don't go to the doctor yet, or they go to a doctor that doesn't test them for vitamin D? With your numbers being 90%, I'm not surprised. I would think the vast majority of people have low vitamin D levels.
Yes, yes. It's incredible because it's not only aged people, also young people that I saw with this program. And my last question is, because I'm very concerned about these young people who die for this COVID-19. And I think this program, for me, is related with the microbiome and with the high production of LPS. What do you think about that?
I'm doing a presentation in 2 days on LPS, and you're absolutely right, Patricia. LPS is extremely important to understand and to include as a screening for all of your patients that come in. Our world today is such, as Professor Fasano says, all disease begins in the gut. And when you have a leaky gut, you get LPS infiltration. Now, the other place, there are 7 different mechanisms by which LPS gets in your bloodstream, but the other main one is high-fat diets.
Yes.
Fat escorts LPS into your bloodstream from the gut. High-fat diet increase LPS. Lipopolysaccharides get into your bloodstream, and the term for that when it's in your bloodstream is endotoxin. And it's the accumulation of endotoxin over the years. It accumulates in your liver, in your kidneys, in your spleen, in your lungs, in your brain. It accumulates and accumulates, and you get brain disease, liver disease, kidney disease, lung disease, and it's been accumulating. Eventually you get sepsis. And when you get 1.7 million people a year in the US get sepsis, and usually they're older, and they go to the hospital with it and they die. And it's 1/3 of all the deaths in hospitals of elders, 1/3 of them have sepsis. And it's being ignored by everyone. So you're absolutely right of the importance of sepsis.
Okay, thank you. So, doctor, I'm going to pass to Dr. Lizano, Arturo Lizano. He's gonna ask all the questions that people have, okay? Thank you. Arturo? Okay, Arturo. See?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Hello, Dr. O'Brien. How are you today, sir?
Hello, Arturo. Very well, thank you.
It's great to see you again, and an honor to have you here. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
An amazing presentation as always. So there's tons of questions, so we'll see how we do with time. What I'm going to do is I am going to read them for the sake of the attendees, participants. I'm just going to read them in Spanish, and then I'll translate them to you in English. How's that?
Okay.
And the answer only has to be in English, and then we'll translate it for them.
Aquí vamos a poner las respuestas.
Is that good?
Yep.
Okay, so here we go. Let's start with, so they're coming from all over the place. Let's see. I'll try to be organized about this. Let's see what we have here. So you've touched on vitamin D a lot. And some people, okay, let's go to vitamin D. There are a lot of questions on vitamin D. So, okay, para los participantes, muchísimas gracias por su participación. Lo que vamos a hacer es que vamos a hacer las preguntas vamos a leer las preguntas en español y yo haré mi mejor esfuerzo por traducirlas al inglés y serán contestadas solamente en inglés y después les pasamos las respuestas, ¿ok? Entonces, hay una pregunta que dice, ¿hay un riesgo por tomar vitamina D sin haberse realizado análisis previamente? So, Dr. O'Brien, a person asks, is there a risk of taking vitamin D supplementation without previous testing?
Good question. No, there is no risk to take the doses that I showed you in the studies for 2 months. In the paper that you'll get, they said for a couple of months, it's fine, daily, 10,000 units a day until you get the levels up, and then 5,000 maintenance. And our usual recommendation for a 150-pound person is they take between 5 and 10,000 units a day for a few months, stop for a week, retest your levels and see where they are, and then determine from there what your therapeutic dose is.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much. And so another one is necesaria la suplementación con vitamina D si uno está expuesto al sol todos los días? So is it necessary right now to supplement with vitamin D if one is exposed to the sun on a daily basis?
Given that up to 90% of the patients presenting in Dr. Madrigal's office, when she tests, have vitamin D deficiencies, and they're out in the sun. Many of those people are out in the sun. So you cannot assume that this most important nutrient is in adequate levels in your if your patients are coming to you, they're sick. There's some reason why they're coming to the doctor. And if they're not well, the first thing on the checklist is the microbiome, always for me. And right there with it is vitamin D levels, every time, every patient.
Yeah, it's interesting. My 2 cents in this matter. I, who obviously practice my medicine here in Costa Rica in a tropical country, I test vitamin D on everyone, 100% of my patients, and 100% of my patients are suboptimal. They're not deficient, but they're suboptimal and that's something that I like to explain to my patients, because we're used to having low levels of vitamin D as the ideal or as the normal. And, I explain to them how it's important to be, in a better range, because that means that you are more, more protected if that may be the case. So
yeah, there are a number of studies that show when your vitamin D is between 50 to 75 nanograms per milliliter, or the conversion, you're at much lower risk of developing autoimmune diseases, much lower risk.
Very good. Let's find another interesting questions. Some are a little technical. We got some really avid readers here. So let's see. I think you've touched a lot on the vitamin C. However, this is an interesting question. Let's see what you have to say, Dr. O'Brien. So, hay alguien que pregunta que debido a que hay tan buena información y se sabe tanto sobre la vitamina C, y se ha dicho que es tan buena, ¿por qué es que no se ha desarrollado más investigación y por qué no hay más estudios y no se sabe más sobre la vitamina C? So, Dr. O'Brien, someone is asking, since you've talked about the vitamin C and it's being so helpful and so cheap to implement, why hasn't it been developed or researched more or enough?
Well, there is a lot of research on it, but it's not accepted in traditional pharmaceutical environments, which would be your hospitals and your medical doctors who have not done postgraduate training in nutrition. They just don't know. They've just never seen it. And if they work in a hospital, they can't do things very easily that the hospital doesn't endorse. And there's no profit in vitamin C for a hospital. It's minimal. I'm sorry to be so blunt about it, but people are dying. And when if you study this, if you were to speak to people who study this, how come this isn't more known? If this is true, what these studies say is true, how come my doctor doesn't know about this? Ask your doctor. Show them the study. Say, how come you don't know about this? And so many doctors will say, well, there's no evidence that that's worth it. Of course there is. You just haven't read the evidence.
Right.
So, It's politics. It's politics.
Which we'll try not to get into too much today. So with the vitamin C, another brief question. Habla sobre los flavonoides y los bioflavonoides. ¿Necesita el paciente tomar vitamina C con flavonoides, con bioflavonoides? So you've touched upon a lot on the vitamin C. I just want to try to go by chapters. Is it necessary for the vitamin C to have bioflavonoids? Or what is the difference between bioflavonoids and not having bioflavonoids?
Very good question. Yeah, bioflavonoids, hesperidin, rutin, they're extremely valuable. They are cofactors. The ascorbic acid is the preservative of the vitamin C complex, but it appears, and for humans are the only ones, the only mammals, no, that's not true. There's one gopher also, I think. In all of the mammals, there's one, I think it was a gopher, and humans, we don't make our own vitamin C. Every other mammal makes their own vitamin C, but we don't. We have to get it from our food. And when we're not eating high quality organic produce, we're just not getting enough vitamin C. Hesperidins and rutins are cofactors that help our body in utilizing the ascorbic acid. So they're very helpful. But when you want high doses of vitamin C, I've never seen hesperidin and rutin being accessible in those kinds of doses.
Very well. We have another question here. Let's see. So it says, hola, Dr. O'Brien, gracias por compartir esta valiosa información. Me gustaría saber su opinión sobre los estudios que existen con respecto al aumento de leucocitos en el cuerpo debido a la comida cocinada. ¿Podría estar esto ligado a las tendencias de hacerse vegano, de convertirse en vegano? So, I've never heard of this. This is an interesting question. See what you know about this, Doc. It says, hello, Dr. O'Brien. Thank you so much for sharing such valuable information. This question comes from Holland. How about that? I would like to know your opinion on the studies regarding, or the information regarding the increase of leukocytes due to cooked food. Is this one of the reasons why there is this whole new tendency of people eating raw vegan?
Very good question. Yeah, there's no question. When you cook food, you change the protein structure. And there's a laboratory in the US called Cyrex Labs, and Holland, you have access to this laboratory in Holland. There's a distributor through London called Regenerus, Regenerus. Regenerus Labs markets the Cyrex test throughout Europe. And one of their tests compares cooked food to raw food. And nobody eats raw chicken, but most of the antigens in blood tests looking at sensitivity to chicken uses raw chicken. So when you compare raw chicken to cooked chicken for sensitivity, sometimes you find the cooked protein is antigenic, whereas the raw food was not. So the idea of including more raw food in your diet has so many benefits. There are many, but one of them is there's more enzymes, there's more life force in the food. You know, when you cook food, you kill it. You kill the food, you kill the enzymes. And as I showed, when you microwave food, you also destroy the polyphenols and the flavonoids. But when we cook food, we kill the life force in the food. And it's not black or white, it's by degrees depending on how you cook it. So I always advocate that we have just a good high percentage of raw food in our diet. I'm not going to be a raw food person. My digestive system will not handle that. And for those of you that want to eat more raw food, you need to transition because your digestive enzymes aren't used to having to digest this rougher food that hasn't been broken down to some degree. So be kind to yourself. Give yourself 6 months to transition. Well, I want to eat a raw food diet, or I want to be a vegetarian. All right, well, now vegetarianism, if it's for spiritual reasons, then you're probably just going to on off, you're going to just stop right away. But if it's for health reasons, I would transition towards vegetarian diet over the course of a month or 2 months, so that your body gets used to pulling some of the nutrients it used to get from meats out of different foods, as opposed to just doing it black and white. But to the question, there is no question, when you cook food, you alter the protein structure, and sometimes it makes it more antigenic or less antigenic.
Perfect. Thanks so much. So, Dr. Brian, as you know, we have tons of participants from all over. Someone is asking, let me do it in Spanish. Alguien pregunta, ¿es necesario consumir suplementos? No podemos solamente con las comidas, ¿verdad? Con nuestros alimentos. So, I really like this question. Sometimes basic questions are sometimes very fundamental and very important. So someone is asking, do you need, especially for us in the functional integrative arena, right? This is a subject I really enjoy. Do you need to supplement? Can't you get your minerals, your vitamins, everything that you need, your nutrients from food, from eating?
You and I have the same body as our ancestors thousands of years ago, the exact same kidneys, the exact same eyes, the same ears, the same liver, the same muscles, bones, surfaces on our joints, same brains. We use our brains more, but everything functions the same. We were designed to be Tarzan and Jane. What does that mean? To live in the Costa Rican jungles. You know, we don't have fur to keep us warm in the wintertime. So we're designed to live on the planet in warm climates, to eat organic produce that we pick off the trees and the berries that we find. That's what we're designed for genetically. Rarely are we supposed to have to fight saber-toothed tigers. Rarely are we supposed to be activating our sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is designed physiologically and, anatomically to run 1 to 3% of the time. The parasympathetic nervous system is designed to run anatomically 97 to 99% of the time. This is the work of Hans Selye from the 1950s. But we do not live in parasympathetic dominance. We live in sympathetic dominance. But our immune systems, our nervous systems, our brains are designed to be in a calm, peaceful, meditative state most of the time. But we live in a high-stress environment all of the time. It's rare that we are in a parasympathetic dominant state when we're awake. It's rare. What does that mean? If you are driving your car on the highway of life, and you're on the highway and you've shifted into 5th gear and you're driving at 70 miles an hour down the highway, your gas mileage is pretty good. It's okay if that's a good speed for the car. You're cruising. But what if you're driving down the highway in 3rd gear at 70 miles an hour? The engine is screaming. You're burning much more fuel. We live in a sympathetic dominant state in this world today. We're burning more fuel. We're using much more petrol, much more oil, much more transmission fluid in our bodies than our ancestors did. So you need more fuel. If you live a calm, peaceful life in a warm climate, you have very little stress, you're rarely having to fight for your life, rarely, then you don't need supplements. But if you are living a stressful life and you're in sympathetic dominance most of the time, You need more fuel because you're in third gear on the highway instead of in fifth gear cruising. That's why you need more fuel.
Mm-hmm. Perfecto. Doc, how many more questions? We have a lot of questions, so we're not going to do all, of course, but
yeah, let's go for another 10 minutes.
Okay, another 10 minutes. Patricia, is that okay? We're good with time? Okay, so, because I have a lot of interesting questions, we're definitely not going to be able to go through all of them. So, and I'm not picking them on purpose. Let's see, I have an interesting question here. It's actually in English, so actually let me try to translate it into Spanish. Muy buenos días, Dr. O'Brien. Muchísimas gracias por su valiosa información. ¿Existen algunas medidas necesarias que se deberían de tomar en personas que tienen enfermedades autoinmunes para prevenir o si es contagiado con los síntomas con el virus del COVID para atenuar, para disminuir los síntomas durante la infección? Yo soy una paciente celíaca con inicios de Hashimoto y mi esposo tiene una condición conocida como pemfigoide. So, well, you're an expert in many things, but this is right up your alley, Dr. O'Brien. This question says, hi, Dr. O'Brien, and thank you so much for your valuable information. Are there any extra measures that you recommend to patients that have autoimmune disease to prevent or in any case depress COVID-19 symptoms if infected? I have controlled celiac and the beginnings of Hashimoto's, and my husband has pemphigoid.
Yes, yes. My book, The Autoimmune Fix, is all about the triggers that make you vulnerable to autoimmune diseases. And the follow-up to that, my book that came out last year, You Can Fix Your Brain.
Here it is. Yay. Gotta have it.
Thank you so much. When we develop degenerative diseases, we were set up. We had to be set up for this. It doesn't happen out of the blue. There has been an accumulative inflammatory process causing degeneration over an extended length of time, killing off tissue, killing off tissue, killing off tissue, killing off tissue, until eventually you now have symptoms, and then eventually you get a diagnosis. So you have to go back into that mechanism. What's the trigger? Now, when two people in a family have autoimmune mechanisms that have been diagnosed, you look to the common environment. That's food selections, that's home environment. Is there mold in the house? That's bacterial infections. You look to common triggers that both people may have. Specifically to your question, what can I do given I have two autoimmune diseases that are under control right now? But what can I do to help strengthen my immune system? The most important thing you can do is build the diversity of your microbiome. Nothing is as powerful as building the diversity of your microbiome. And if I may, I will give you a 5-step process to build the diversity of your microbiome, and then we'll call it a day. Mrs. Patient, when you go shopping and you're buying your vegetables, always organic, of course, but buy some of every root vegetable in the store. Get rutabagas and turnips and parsnips and carrots and sweet potatoes and radishes. Get every root vegetable there is and have one root vegetable a day, every day. Because every family of root vegetables feeds different good bacteria in your gut. They're called prebiotics. And you're feeding the probiotics, the good bacteria in your gut. And the patients say, I don't know how to cook a rutabaga. And my answer is, neither do I. I just dice it up, I slice an onion, peel some garlic, a little coconut oil or avocado oil, saute it together until it's soft, put some peanut sauce on it or some red Thai chili or whatever flavor I'm going to use, and I eat it. And then, but what about burdock root? I don't know how to cook burdock root. Neither do I. I just dice it up and slice an onion and peel some garlic and saute it together in a little coconut oil and add some flavoring to it, and I eat it. You just got to get it down there. And when you go to a nice restaurant, you often see radishes that they slice very thin, raw, and they put them on the salad, and you eat them, and they taste pretty good. Just you'll figure out how to eat it. Just every day, you have one different root vegetable every day. Then you go to Google, and you type in list of prebiotic foods, and print it out, and it goes on your refrigerator. And every day you have 2 from the list. Bananas are a prebiotic. Onions are a prebiotic. Every day you have 2. You keep switching them out because they all feed different good bacteria in your gut. That's number 1, those 2 things, prebiotics. Then, Mrs. Patient, for 2 months, I want you to take this powdered prebiotic for a couple of months. While we're transitioning your diet to build a good microbiome, I want to make sure you get all of the good prebiotics in there. So, and I use a product called Mega Prebiotic. There are many good ones out there. And I take it every day. It's in my smoothie every day, but I just want you to take it for 2 months. I think it's great to do it every day, but just for 2. So you give the patients a limited amount of time and they'll comply with that. And then maybe they'll continue later, maybe not, but they'll comply with that. That's number 1. Number 2, Mrs. Patient, I want you to get 5 different types of fermented vegetables and keep them in your refrigerator. 5 different types. Get sauerkraut, kimchi, miso, fermented beets, curry flavored, whatever you want, but get 5 different types. And every day you have 1 forkful of fermented vegetables, because every vegetable that ferments produces different families of the good probiotics. So you're inoculating yourself with many different families of probiotics every day, and switch them out. Don't just eat sauerkraut, switch them out. My friend, oh my gosh. She wrote the kimchi diet last year. And I'm not remembering, I see her face right in front of me. But it's a great book. It's an excellent book on how simple it is to make kimchi. You can make it at home, but until you do, get 5 different types from, just make sure they're not pasteurized. Then I want you to take a supplement of probiotics for 2 months. So you're going to take a supplement of prebiotic and probiotic for 2 months. I use Megaspore because using the spore-based probiotics is so much more effective than the old ways that we used to use. But for 2 months, I take it every day. My wife and I take it when we go to bed every night. We take Megaspore, but at least for 2 months. That's number 2. Number 1 is the prebiotics. Number 2 is the probiotics. And then number 3 is the supplement of prebiotic. Number 4 is the supplement of probiotic. So you're teaching them to change their lifestyle and you're supplementing them at the same time. Number 5, in England, they call it stewed apples. Here, we call it applesauce. Take 5, 6 apples, wash them, always organic. Wash them, don't peel them, cut the seeds out, dice them up small, put them in a pot, add water to about 1/3 the height of the apples, put a little cinnamon in there, maybe a few raisins, turn it on high, bring it to a boil. About 10 minutes into it, 10, 12 minutes into it, look in there and you see that there's a shine on the skin of the apples. It's done. As soon as you see the shine, what does that mean? The shine is the pectin from the meat and the skin has been released from the apple and it's on the surface, so it's easily accessible in the small intestine. Pectin increases a very important enzyme in your gut called intestinal alkaline phosphatase. IAP. Intestinal alkaline phosphatase does so many good things for your gut. It enhances the probiotics, helps them bind and reproduce. It kills endotoxin, the LPS, by 73%, reduces endotoxin getting into the bloodstream by 73%. Turns on the genes to heal and reproduce healthy epithelial lining to the gut. It turns on the genes for anti-inflammation. Reduces cholesterol, reduces triglycerides, increases insulin sensitivity, all from IAP. And you can increase your IAP by having a couple of tablespoons of applesauce every day. Just a couple of tablespoons every day. It has to be fresh. The commercial stuff doesn't work. So those 5 things, you are educating your patient to take control of their life, take control of their health by changing how they're eating with things that they've never thought to do before. And you're giving them the best supplements that I know of to rebuild a healthy microbiome.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, we're almost out of time. I want to ask you I want to teach you for 2 more minutes. I want to ask you just one last question. We have tons of questions, but one last question, because I think this is important and relevant to everything that we're talking about. Y lo que le quiero preguntar ya para ir cerrando con el Dr. O'Brien es, ¿qué considera él sobre la importancia de la actividad física asociada al sistema inmunológico? So basically, Dr. O'Brien, how important do you feel more than exercise, how important do you feel physical activity is in regards to immunity?
There's some remarkable studies that I just learned of yesterday on forest bathing. And these studies came out of a joint effort from a university in Japan and Stanford. And they took people and measured the number of natural killer cells they had and measured the chemokines inside natural killer cells. There's 4 different ones. I don't remember the names of them. So they measured how potent were your natural killer cells and how many do you have. They then drove 3 hours to a forest, and that day they walked for 2.5 hours in the forest, just walked. The next morning, at the same time as they drew the blood the first day, when they were still in Tokyo or wherever they were, they drew the blood again. And they found there was a statistically significant increase in natural killer cells and all 4 chemokines. Then they went for a 2.5-hour walk in the morning and a 2.5-hour walk in the evening. Then the next morning, they drew their blood again, and again, a statistically significant increase in the number of natural killer cells and in the number of chemokines, how potent these natural killer cells were. And then they went back home. They did the same type of study in the city, where they had them sleep in a hotel room every night instead of going back to their house, and they walked around the city. There was no change in their natural killer cells, but increased stress hormones were produced, and no change in the number of chemokines, walking 2.5 hours a day or 2.5 hours twice a day, no change. And what they know is that walking by itself did not have much of an effect on natural killer cells, but walking in a forest did. And they discovered that there are essential oils in the pine trees that people are breathing when they're walking in a forest. So it opens up the whole world of essential oils and how there is benefit to diffusers and essential oils to help support your immune system. I just learned of these studies yesterday. They're very cool. In terms of studies on activity and your immune system, there are literally hundreds of studies on just mild activity. Going for a walk every day is beneficial and enhancing your immune system function. There's no question about that. It's not debated. I haven't seen anyone challenge that. You don't have to jump rope You don't have to run a marathon. You don't have to be really aggressive. There are benefits to being a little more active in your exercise, but you don't have to help your body function better and enhance immune system function.
Amazing stuff, Dr. O'Brien. We wish we could have you all day and all weekend to ask you many more. We have tons of questions that are unfortunately will not be able to be answered today, but I thank everyone. Patricia is going to be doing the closing remarks. On my behalf, Dr. O'Brien, I can't thank you enough. It's so good to have you in Costa Rica. It's so good to have you here. And thank you so much for your valuable time and all of this amazing information. We hope to have you again. It's always great to see you. And on behalf of Costa Rica, Latin America, and all of us, we can't thank you enough.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Patricia.
Yes, Dr. O'Brien. Thank you. And gracias, de verdad. We appreciate your time and are grateful for the opportunity to have you. We hope this can happen again and continue to learn from you. Thanks for your research and making all this information simple for us. Thank you, really. I want to thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure. I want to remind everyone, all of the slides and the studies are there for you at thedoctor.com/clinica. And last week, I did 8 sessions of coffee with Dr. Tom, and they are at thedoctor.com/coffee. And you can watch all of those, and all the slides and all the studies are there for you to deepen your education about this current pandemic that we're in. Thank you all very much for the opportunity.